Welcome to the Momentum Flow podcast, where ideas, innovations, and experiences are shared to create a continuous stream of inspiration and insight. Join me, your host, Luis Solana, a supply chain expert and investor, as I uncover how visionary founders, operators, and leaders are spotting opportunities, sparking innovation, and scaling profitable growth. From plan to cash, I bring real-world experience and an investor's eye to reveal how clarity, capital, and conviction fuel sustainable growth. Tune in and let's keep the momentum flow going. Today's conversation is a special one for the supply chain community. Joining me is Scott DeGroot, the Managing Director of the Global Supply Chain Institute at the Haslam College of Business of the University of Tennessee. Scott spent decades leading supply chain transformation in industry, including a remarkable run at Kimberly-Clark, where his teams drove major improvements in service, inventory reduction, and logistics network performance. Today, he's shaping the next generation of supply chain leaders, bringing hard-earned operator insights into the classroom and the boardroom. Scott, welcome to the Momentum Flow.
Now, Luis, it's a real pleasure to be here. I love this topic. I love the impact that supply chains make, and I love talking about it. So the extent that you invited me, I'm very happy for this, and I'm excited for the conversation today.
So let's have some fun. So obviously, you bring a very unique perspective to the conversation because you have lived supply chain transformation from both sides of the equation. First, you were a senior industry operator, and now you're a leader shaping the next generation of supply chain talent. So probably to begin, could you describe and contrast that extensive experience at Kimberly-Clark and then the college, the Global Supply Chain Institute at the University of Tennessee? That's really a nice people, right? From industry to a little bit more on the faculty side. Could you share the insights of your personal journey?
Yeah, I'd love to. And of course, I'll start out by saying, there's nothing like being in an operation or in operations in terms of being a part of the physical supply chain. And without boring too many, I started out as an hourly employee working in a warehouse, driving a lift truck, loading trucks and unloading trucks. And that experience, I think, was foundational to understand the fact that the supply chain is actually improving the lives of people every day. And during my experience at Kimberly-Clark, great company, I was able to work in all aspects of logistics and in planning and in sourcing and in strategy and in sales and at all levels, and ultimately around the globe. I was very blessed to be a part of an amazing organization with iconic brands. And I feel today, I felt then, and I feel now that supply chain really does make a difference in the lives of people. And, of course, as I completed what I thought was an excellent career that ticked all the boxes, as I came to retirement point, I kind of felt like there was a little bit more, more to do, more in terms of giving back, quite honestly. And I know that sounds trite, but once you do all the things and you travel the world and you have an amazing time with an amazing team, this idea of giving back, shaping the thinking in supply chain, being engaged with students and practitioners. Global Supply Chain Institute has over 75 partner companies that I get to see and interact with all the time. It's just an amazing, I won't call it second career. It is my second career, but it's an amazing culmination of what has been a wonderful experience.
That's a remarkable life story, and I'm sure that being with students keeps you young, and that's great. So what keeps your momentum personally going all along this time?
Yeah, I at first, I like to tell students this. At first, it was just a desire to learn, to learn everything you can because I always find in a lot of people, Luis, I know you like this, you're constantly wanting to learn more. The more I know, the more I want to learn. I'm urgently curious. And so phase one was just learning about that and to be excited about how you could make a difference. Kind of phase two was this, okay, now I know some things. How can I earn, you're learning, then you're earning respect. Of course, you earn money, but you earn accountability, you have authority, you have big things that the organization tasks you to do. So there's that phase of really doing really, really impactful work. And then you get to the point, or at least I did that. Okay, now how can I return? I've learned, I continue to learn. I'm earning, I continue to earn, but now I want to return and give back to students, give back to the industry, shape the future thinkers. We're going to talk a little bit about resilience and agility and talk about technology and all of those things. You and I, we have context, and that context is vitally important to the future of the supply chain. So that's what keeps me going. I'm curious, I want to keep learning, and I want to give back.
That sounds wonderful. So before jumping into talent and people, because that's a topic that I definitely want to dwell deep with you and also talk about your planning experience. But first, and you teed up nicely, let's talk about supply chains and the resilience about them. So we both spent decades operating supply chains, right? Looking back, when did you realize that the industry was moving from really cost optimization to resiliency and adaptability?
Yes, yes. I'd like to tell you that, and all the listeners there, that it was some sort of amazing mountaintop epiphany experience that I had. But in reality, it was COVID. And of course, COVID happened later in my career, but I was accountable at the time for all planning and logistics across the enterprise at Kimberly-Clark. And among the other amazing products that Kimberly-Clark makes, toilet paper is one of them. And everyone ran out of toilet paper, and it is one of those. I don't know if Churchill is attributed to this saying. I know if he said it or not, but you never waste a good crisis. So this idea that, hey, the supply chain as we designed it and did academic research back in the 70s and the 80s, and this mindset of MRP kind of demand-driven supply chains that are really focused on efficiency, and then we got into lean and Six Sigma and reducing, which all that's good. We don't want waste, but we became overly reliant. And in COVID, of course, all my high school friends were calling me. They were saying, Scott, I don't have any toilet paper at my store. Can you send some toilet paper? And, with all of our wise business planning and business contingency planning, we never expected or never ran a scenario that said, well, we were going to have a 300 to 500% increase in the demand of toilet paper. You don't have that much reserve capacity. Tissue machines cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and you run them 95, 98% of the time full. And so this idea that, hey, we are really exposed here, not just because of a great increased demand, but our transportation routes, our inventory policies, they were all built really in a very static environment, Luis. And so, we spent many sleepless nights and on telephone calls or video conferences around the globe, nearly 24 hours a day for weeks on end. Of course, we resolved it and we continued to operate safely and give consumers what they wanted. But that was really a wake-up call that said to me, not only the Kimberly-Clark supply chain, but broadly speaking, supply chains need to be rethought in terms of resilience and agility, not just for efficiency.
First of all, I didn't call you to get toilet paper, but I did my fair long line at Costco myself, trying to get some of it. But all joking aside, moving from obviously, there's big structural changes that companies have to make in order not to operate just for efficiency, but for resiliency. What comes to mind operating for resiliency rather than just for productivity or for efficiency?
Right, right. Well, certainly before we get into that exactly, there's always going to be a place for operational excellence and efficiency. And so I don't think any company, in fact, I'm talking to a big company earlier today, that is stepping away from this idea of continuous improvement, efficiency, productivity, code words for cost savings, 3, 4, 5% a year. That's always going to be there. But I think what's happening now, of course, is, as you know, companies have to be resilient, which comes from understanding all the possible disruptions that can occur, all the competitive pressures that can occur, and then mapping out ahead of time what actions will be taken if this event occurs. And in the past, you and I will remember the days where you would build a network design, you would model and the network, and that would take weeks or months of time to gather all this data, to sort it, to segregate it, and then to run scenarios, and those scenarios would take weeks. But now you and I both know that technology allows that to happen in days, in hours in some cases. And it's really then this idea of, do I have the right decision structures? Am I having the right conversations to take advantage of these very fast scenario planning based models? And in many cases, companies are not investing in the way that they can to operationalize their contingency plans. If I lose this transportation route, if my supplier goes out of business, if the costs or tariff policies cause my costs go up by 30 or 40%, can I execute my contingency plans in a reasonable time? I think that's really one of the obstacles we have to overcome, Luis, in this business, is operationalizing and investing in, our contingency plans.
So you say you interact through the institute with 75 or so number of companies, right? Through students and corporate sponsorships and that. So that's a very interesting vantage point. So what supply chain capability are companies most urgently trying to build today?
Well, I think a lot of people are building out what you might call a digital ecosystem that ultimately is multiple layers. And before I describe that, I always ask this question about, why are we building out a digital ecosystem for operational execution with AI agents and scenario planning and advanced planning systems for sort of running the business and strategic decision making. They're building out all these things because they feel like they can make better decisions. And ultimately, as we talk about supply chain should be driving better outcomes in terms of either revenue growth, top line sales, margin improvement, of course, and cash flow productivity, so end-to-end cash flow. These are all things that companies want, and they are excited about sort of the shiny objects in the room. I'm going to have some AI agents. I'm going to have an advanced planning system. I'm going to build in place, put APIs to make all my data latency go away. But what they're not doing in many cases is changing the talent that they need to run these things, the decision-making cycle. And if we're not driving decisions and outcomes, then the supply chain is, some of that money, Luis, is really probably not well spent. We're leaving money on the table when we don't activate the right governance structure around this much more advanced, much more capable digital ecosystem.
Yeah, that's definitely true. At the same time, resiliency ultimately depends on not just systems, right? It depends on people who know really how to run those systems. So maybe this is a perfect moment to just pivot into the talent side. So because there's a lot of excitement around AI in supply chain, right? You know it, I know it. So, but from what you're seeing with companies and with students, is the real constraint the technology or the talent that knows how to use that technology?
Yes. No, it's the perfect question. And of course, I see companies that are 12, 24, 36 months more advanced in their thinking. And so there's a real dichotomy. And some companies that just can't figure out how to get started on the technology side. But those companies that are more advanced on technology side are also becoming more advanced on how do I bring my people up to snuff? And in terms of their capability to understand business context, to make the right connections between problems and solutions, to understand the kind of trade-off decisions that need to be pushed forward, to build the technology that's serving the operational improvements that need to happen, not simply building technology for technology's sake. And some of the capabilities, we're talking to students and we're doing research in this area with a number of companies. Some of the capabilities that are not where we need them to be to take full of one, compelling communication. We might have people who understand the technical aspects of the demand algorithm or the right prompt engineering to put in place, but they don't know how to communicate decisions in a way that drives ownership. Number two, they don't really are not really comfortable with ambiguity. No decision can be perfectly timed out and understand all the demand variables and supply variables. So there are always some level of ambiguity. Yet you need to make decisions. And a third thing is financial acumen. And I know you know this from your experience, but ultimately businesses are about profit and loss and cash flow and cash to cash conversion cycles. And if the supply chain people are not able to speak into that language, well, then how can they win the day when it comes to investment or return or growth in the company? And these are all things that I think from a talent perspective, you and I and those people listening have an obligation to upskill our teams and to make sure that talent is capable for the tools that we're giving them.
I totally agree. Those three capabilities that you mentioned, communication, managing ambiguity, financial acumen, are definitely part of, what the next generation supply chain leaders might need to have. But let me dwell deeper. What about advanced analytics or cross-functional influence or digital decision making? Do you see them playing out at the same level? Yes, no?
Yes, I will. I do. Let's talk about analytics and comfort with data. I mean, I can tell you for now 2 years and coming on 3 years, students graduating not only from the University of Tennessee, but I'm sure from all the top supply chain universities are very, very comfortable with analytics and with data and insights. And I mean, they're coding in Python and R, and they're building LP models, on the weekends very quickly. They're very comfortable with Perplexity and Claude Code. So I don't know that any younger people, younger than me, lack any ability to be comfortable with data and driving. But I do think that they lack contextual understanding. Not only is the data hallucinating, do I have the right guardrails? Am I really asking the right kind of questions of my models? Do I understand the outcomes of the models in a way that I can explain it to someone who is not? Like, okay, I created this black box. I did this coding with Cloud Code over the weekend. I did some vibe coding. It's really cool. It tells us we should move these demand streams here. Okay, can you explain that to someone who doesn't understand any of those first things? It's that sort of language I think that you talk about it needs to be improved. And um, I do think that this idea of decision making, what's the purpose of SNOP and IBP, is to drive contextual decision making that improves business outcomes, right? So I think a lot of people don't have the skills that they need or we need them to have to be really bold with that kind of capability.
I think I couldn't agree more. I think probably the biggest thing, you can have all the tools, you can have all the analytics, you can have all the technology, but context would always be important in any decision
Mm.
making tool, especially the one that is evolving towards highly automated to really, prevent hallucinations or out of context responses or decision making. So fully echo that. So now, at least from my perspective, as an operator, former operator, I don't think AI replaced supply and demand planners in organizations. On the contrary, I think it's elevating planning to really a strategic role. So, question to you: you think we're entering an era where supply chain planners, demand planners, become really the enterprise decision leaders?
Well, I think that we are, but I think that lies in front of us, Luis. I think we are on the precipice of being able to achieve that, but it's important, but there are some threats to that in my mind. Um, Number one, there is a certain aspect of, let's just think about planning in totality as yeah, I know you've said this too. Think about it as the central nervous system of the body. You need the heart and you need a whole part of the body. But the central nervous system is planning. And it operates at multiple levels. We have this sort of executional, weekly, daily level. We have this run the business in the next 3 months level. This executional aspect of planning, we do need to make sure that we can automate these transactional work. The inputting of rates of operation, the massaging of demand forecast inputs, the communication back and forth between one system to the next. These things need to be eliminated. Let the robots and let the automation do that. If we do that, then we can reposition planning correctly, I think, as the drivers of the decision. I mean, planning's not just about forecasting. It should be, right? It should be about driving decisions for the business in a range of scenarios. Like we're going to have a range of demand, a range of supply, a range of weather, a range of risks. And within that range, we need to drive several very important decisions. And when planning acts in that more strategic way, then it can cement itself as the conductor of the orchestra, to use another analogy. But planning is really a decision system, or it should be, not just a forecasting exercise, I think.
I fully agree, and I definitely like that analogy, right? The planning as the central nervous system of the body and or the operating system. So it's but in many organizations, planning now sits between commercial demand, production capability, logistics execution, right? And the and do you really see supply chain becoming the true decision nerve of that enterprise? I'm not letting you escape without telling me that. So
Yeah, yeah. I think number one, we get oftentimes, and I understand the reasons why, but we get caught up on where are the lines in the organizational chart put planning. Demand planning should be, maybe some people think demand planning should be in sales or on commercial side, and supply planning should be on the supply side. And we're going to keep those separate and distinct forever because of all the motivations and the reward systems of all these different people. But I'd like to think about and shake up that model a bit, Luis, by saying really planning should be agnostic, right? Should to the 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 motivations of either people on the commercial side where there's never enough inventory, like more inventory is better because I can sell, and the supply side, like we want consistency and efficiency. Planning does need to find a way to be agnostic to both of those pressure points and really be driving the fact that, hey, based on the facts and the data, we have this reasonable range of demand and this reasonable range of supply. The decisions will have this kind of impact on our revenue and our share and our inventory conversion costs and our operational costs. And then driving those decisions, I oftentimes think that the best advocate, the best partner for planners, if the job is done right, is the financial organization, who
yeah.
also should be agnostic to the motivations of people's individual KPIs and driving what is the best decision for the organization. And so sometimes the organizational chart gets in the way,
Yeah,
honestly.
I fully agree. Honestly, and it shouldn't. I echo that. At the end, you know that I'm a strong proponent of integrated business planning, right? I've seen it at the work when it's really implemented correctly. It becomes truly the backbone of the organization, can enable growth, not just savings or cost avoidance. So it's paramount in enterprises. That's why, if we keep in that line of thought on planning, being at the center, what technologies are most exciting right now in planning from your
Yeah.
perspective? What you've seen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm a bit of a planning nerd, so I get excited about a lot of things. I'm excited about the speed and efficiency of what are now advanced planning systems, especially when it comes to scenario planning in the 0 to 12 month time horizon. This idea of making the right operational trade-offs to actually run the business. And in fact, sitting in meetings, and I sat in with one of our partner companies a couple months ago when the P&L lead, the business unit president, and the sales and the supply chain people were in the room, and we're running through scenarios in real time, making real time trade-offs on what are our operating excellence performance, what's the impact of the decision on cash flow in the moment. Like in the next hour, we're going to make this decision. I mean, it's amazing. Years ago, that would have taken a month. So the speed of our IBP cycle is so fast. So I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited about also, and I know this sometimes the promise of this, people roll their eyes, but um, intelligent control towers and this idea of having digital twins that are really representative of how our supply chain is operating. These network models now are so fast that they can actually operate at multiple levels, not just deciding where the next factory goes or where I put my next line, but how I'm running the business, how I can pressure test different excursions, and then see how I can respond and what it would cost to respond. So I really love the fact that our digital twins and our intelligent control towers can make the business so much more agile if we'll just use them. And the last thing I will say, I know I'm going a bit long, but I don't think I'm excited about those things, but I'm concerned about the fact that our IBP process, our decision-making process of S&OP, IBP, is not fast as the technology. And in that gap, we lose out on a lot of opportunities. And I see the best companies filling that gap with much, much more shortened IBP and S&OP business cycles because they can, and their competitors can't.
That's interesting, and I'm going to go off script here. But on IBP, how many? So what are you seeing right now? Because traditionally companies try to run on monthly cycles, right? Or that's traditionally. Have you seen? Are you seeing now bi-monthly cycles, weekly cycles on the full?
Yeah, yeah, I am. And of course, during COVID, I'll just mention COVID again. We were forced to, and many companies were forced to shorten their S&OP or
Yeah,
IBP cycles to like we just need to stay alive. So we're
yeah.
going to make these kind of assortment decisions and demand and supply decisions weekly, which is amazing. But then we got lazy again. But now I do see great companies who do have a very solid digital foundation, not perfect, but very solid. Clear trade-off handoffs between the executional 0 to 10 days, the monthly making decision cycles, every 2 weeks. So I can understand demand and run scenarios against it in real time. I have a pretty good understanding of the true cost to serve or the operating profit of my major lines of business. I can make these trade-off decisions, but they're also learning very quickly. This worked, this did not. Let's run it again. Let's meet together in 2 weeks and make new decisions. And I think that's super exciting. I also know some people get really nervous by that, right? Like, no, I want stability. I don't want nervousness in my supply chain. Well, let's freeze the demand plan and we'll just run for the next 3 weeks this schedule. And so a lot of people have to change their mindset.
Yeah, it's I can see that. It's different. Really, it depends on how quick the demand is changing, right? But you're absolutely right. It's those times of running just on perennially into the same length of cycles. Probably they have to be dynamic cycles. Sometimes you
Yes.
can run more monthly, but sometimes you need to have the adaptability to run weekly when needed. So yeah, we went a little deeper in planning. So I'm gonna skip a couple of the
Sure.
thoughts. I was gonna go into logistic area with you, but I think with you, with your wealth of experience in planning, I thought it would be a lot more interesting as we were talking planning.
I love it.
I'm also a little bit of a planning nerd as well, once in a while. So I like that. But before we're converging toward the end of our time, but before we wrap up, I would like to, have a fast-paced lightning round, some Q&A, just to get your first impression,
Okay.
what you get. So, let's say one supply chain capability every CEO should understand and why.
Well, they should understand the true cost to serve or true cost to profit. I mean, I think most CEOs and many business leaders don't really understand what activities and what products and what part of their supply chain is actually making a profit and which one is losing. And so I think that's it. If you don't understand your true cost to serve, or even better, your true cost of profitability, then you really don't understand your business and you really don't understand the trade-offs that you're asking your team to make.
Cost to serve, I love it. So one technology that will reshape supply chains in the next decade.
Mm.
You can only pick one.
Well, just off the top of my head, I do have to go with, very high speed scenario planning. And not only does that allow rapid decompression of the S&OP and IBP cycle, but it also allows you to do resiliency planning and business continuity planning. So I'll stay with that one.
What is the biggest mistake you're seeing when companies try to apply AI in supply chain?
Well, they apply it without a specific problem to solve, right? They are just doing it because it might be the expectation of the CEO, or because their competitors are doing it, or because they have a chief technology officer who wants to do it. But what they really should be focusing on is we have a big list of problems. Let's apply AI and agentic and technology in ways that are solving those problems in a triaged, constructive, intentional way. And so I see a lot of people. I know a company right now that has spent many millions of dollars to put robotics in DC. Oh, that's great. Did they have a labor cost problem in their DC? They did not. Right? That was not anywhere near the top 10 but it was cool because they saw someone else doing it. So you have to be intentional.
Yeah, I fully agree. I fully agree. One leadership trait of great supply chain operators.
Well, they have to be resilient. Ultimately, supply chain is a game where, in my opinion, in my experience, and I would hope that you would agree, it's never over. You never achieve perfection, perfect flow, perfect momentum, the perfect order all the time. No, so we have to have this resilience of we're going to keep going and we're going to keep learning. We're going to keep pushing the envelope. We're going to be self-aware and know, hey, this didn't work. I'm going to put my ego aside and figure out what I learned and then do the next thing that makes it better. But I really think that's the key to supply chain, this idea that we're going to keep at it, 24/7, 365, and we're going to keep learning. And that's what I think the best supply chain skill is, if that makes sense.
This is fun. Let me keep going. A couple of more short questions, two more probably. Advice that you will give to the next generation supply chain professionals and leaders, and you're among a lot of them on a daily basis. So.
Well, I think the first one is, they can't get frustrated to the point that we were just talking about. Their solutions aren't going to be perfect. They're not going to work the first time or even the third time. This idea that you're going to thicken up your skin, you're going to keep at it, you're going to be urgently curious. I guess that's the second one, this idea that if I'm always interested in learning as the most important thing and improving myself and my team's performance, then I am not going to be proud. I'm going to be humble and I'm going to be urgently curious. And I think that's, I see a lot of students, especially with the dawn of advanced learning models like Perplexity and Claude, whichever one you want to call out, that they can go and type in some prompts and really get really, really good answers. But are those answers right? And do they work, in the real world? And can they survive all the pushes and pulls of late trucks and labor that doesn't show up in wars, in canal zones? No, right? So they have to have this resiliency, and if they're curious, they'll keep trying.
One last short question, and I really want to hear your answer on this one. So why should supply chain be exciting for aspiring college students? I'm sure you have a view on that.
Yeah. I love it. And this is what I'll say, like the first day of class, is that, in all seriousness now, everything that we are wearing and that we're eating and drinking and that we're using, like right now, we're using these things to do our job, everything, our whole lives, our whole social and economic infrastructures are built on the supply chain, planning, sourcing, making, delivering, returning, with this idea of there's a consumer somewhere who's going to spend their money to do this thing, and you want them to do your thing, to buy your product and to work on your service. And then because of that, and because of all the way back until the human beings started forming communities together and sharing things. Supply chain has been there, and that supply chain will always be there. And yes, we will have more robotics, and yes, we will have AI, and yes, we'll become more efficient. But this idea that our economies are built on highly performing supply chains, I think, should lend some level of a positive feeling like these things will continue, and you should be excited to be a part of this journey.
As a lifelong supply chain professional, I couldn't echo that more. So I love your answer. So now, as you know, this podcast is called the Momentum Flow. And so when you look at the innovation happening across the industry, new technologies, new ways of thinking, new talent, what gives you the most confidence that the momentum in supply chain innovation will keep building on?
Yeah, I think I'm confident because the society needs us. They need us to be successful, and they need our companies to be successful. They need our products and our innovation and our thinking. Ultimately, society continues. Sometimes we go backwards, but most of the time we're going forward, building on what our parents before us built. We're building on this idea of all this work that's done in the past, and the innovation cycles are getting faster, as you know. Just
Mhm.
from the dawn of the internet till now, we've just shortened. So it's incumbent upon us to make the future better and not to have these dystopian outcomes, but instead to deliver value to people who are going to part with their hard-earned money, to select us. And that's what gives me great hope for the future.
That's really nice to hear. So, Scott, you know, your transformation work at Kimberly to shape the next generation leaders at the Global Supply Chain Institute, you're really helping the industry to move forward. Thank you for joining us at the Momentum Flow. I want to give you the last word. If any comments that you want to do to wrap up our session.
Well, Luis, let me just say it's a real pleasure to speak with you. I love these conversations that we have, and I love that we're both pointed in a direction of making the world a better place and doing what we can in the supply chain to make sure that the lives of our children are better than the lives that we had together. And so I'm excited to talk to you about this, and thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. Really, what stands out to me is that the future supply chains won't be defined by technology alone. They will be defined by talent, planning intelligence, discipline execution. Thank you for joining us. To our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share with your fellow operators, innovators, and leaders across the supply chain ecosystem. I'm Luis Solana, and this is the Momentum Flow, where clarity, capital, and conviction keep supply chains and leaders moving forward. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep the momentum flow going. Thank you.